"You're in my seat," the flight attendant said, her voice sharp and dismissive. Maya looked up, meeting her gaze, but the words didn't make sense. "Excuse me?" Maya asked, her voice steady but confused. "This seat's reserved for a white passenger," the attendant insisted, as though it were the most natural thing in the world. Zara, sitting beside her, looked down at the aisle, biting her lip, tried to avoid the sudden tension hanging in the air. But Maya wasn't going to let this slide. "We're not moving," Maya said, her voice quiet but firm. The words felt like a weight in the air, and the passengers around them seemed to freeze, waiting for the next move. The attendant's face flushed with irritation, and she stepped back, glancing at the other passengers who were already muttering to one another. It was a momentary silence, but it was charged with something more. Maya's hands clenched the armrest, and Zara shifted uneasily in her seat. They had been through this before, the sideways glances, the whispers, the little comments about their place in the world. But not like this. Not here. The attendant was insistent, her eyes narrowing. "You don't have a choice," she said, the words dripping with entitlement. Maya met her gaze, unwavering. "No," she replied simply. Zara shifted her weight and glanced nervously around the cabin, feeling the eyes of the other passengers on them. But Maya wasn't backing down. "We're staying right here," Maya added, her voice louder now. The attendant opened her mouth, but before she could respond, a low, commanding voice interrupted. "Is there a problem here?" Every head in the cabin turned as the figure emerged from the back of the plane. Tall, confident, his eyes locked with the flight attendant's, and there was no mistaking the authority in his gaze. William Carter, CEO of one of the largest tech companies in the world, stepped into the aisle. The attendant froze. The room, once filled with low murmurs, fell silent. William's presence was magnetic, the kind of power that could shift an entire atmosphere. The flight attendant, suddenly aware of the gravity of the situation, hesitated, her mouth opening and closing in disbelief. "You will apologize," William said, his voice calm, but there was a definite edge to it. The tension in the air thickened. It was as if the world outside had vanished, and it was just this moment that mattered. The flight attendant blinked, taken aback by his authority, but Maya and Zara could feel the shift, the balance of power tilting in their favor. "And you will move the other passenger," William continued, his words like a final declaration. The attendant's face turned pale. Around them, passengers exchanged looks, some stunned, others uncomfortable. Maya, still holding Zara's hand, felt her heart race, but she knew one thing for sure. This wasn't just about the seat. This was about respect. This was about standing up, even when the world wanted you to sit down. William's gaze didn't waver as he stood in the aisle, his presence alone commanding attention. The tension that had been building throughout the cabin seemed to freeze in that single moment. The flight attendant, now visibly flustered, stammered, trying to gather her composure. I didn't realize," she began, her voice faltering as she glanced at the other passengers, whose eyes were now fixed on her. She opened and closed her mouth, but found no words strong enough to challenge him. William's voice, steady as ever, broke the silence. "It's not about realizing. It's about respecting others. Your actions were out of line." The weight of his words seemed to hang in the air. For a brief moment, the flight attendant was silent, her face pale as she processed what had just unfolded. Maya and Zara exchanged a glance, their breaths shallow but steady. They could feel the power shift in the room. The very air around them had changed. They had fought for themselves, but now, with their father standing before them, there was a quiet sense of vindication that coursed through them. The flight attendant, still in shock, moved towards the aisle, and with one final look at William, she muttered an apology. "I'm sorry," she said, barely audible, as she turned to speak with the other passenger. The atmosphere in the cabin felt different now. The once tense silence was replaced by a quiet murmur among the passengers, who seemed to breathe a collective sigh of relief. They had witnessed something they weren't used to seeing, someone who had the courage to stand up, not just for themselves, but for those who couldn't be seen. As Maya and Zara settled back into their seats, A calmness settled over them. The storm outside, though still raging, felt distant now. They were no longer just two young women on a plane. They were empowered by the very presence of their father, the one person who had always fought for their dignity. William glanced at his daughters, his eyes softening. "You did good," he said, his voice filled with pride. They nodded, their hearts still pounding, but with a sense of accomplishment that would stay with them long after the flight. The rest of the journey was peaceful, the earlier tension forgotten, replaced by a quiet understanding among the passengers. Maya and Zara had learned a valuable lesson that day. Standing your ground isn't just about the fight, it's about what comes after, the respect you earn and the courage you inspire. They knew that this wasn't just a victory for them, but for anyone who had ever been overlooked, underestimated, or dismissed. As the plane began its descent, the steady hum of the engines was the only sound that filled the cabin. Maya and Zara sat in their seats, their minds replaying the events of the past hour. They had never felt so empowered, so seen. The eyes of the other passengers, who had once looked at them with indifference or judgment, now seemed to hold a different kind of gaze, a mixture of respect and quiet admiration. The tension from earlier had completely dissipated, leaving behind a profound sense of peace. William, sitting beside them, was unusually quiet. His gaze was fixed outside the window, but Maya could sense his pride, not in the confrontation itself, but in how his daughters had held their ground. The flight attendant, who had once been so firm in her stance, now avoided eye contact with Maya and Zara. The other passengers, too, seemed to keep to themselves, perhaps uncertain of what to say or how to react to the unexpected turn of events. But that didn't matter to Maya or Zara. The fight had never really been about the seat. It had been about proving to themselves that they were not invisible, that their worth wasn't defined by anyone else's perception. As the captain's voice came over the intercom, signaling the final approach into the airport, Maya glanced at her father. "Thank you," she said, her voice soft but full of meaning. William turned to her, his smile small but sincere. "You don't need to thank me," he said, his voice warm. "You handled it on your own. I'm proud of you both." Zara, who had been silent up until that point, smiled shyly. "It feels different, Dad," she said, her voice still carrying the weight of what had just happened. "Like, people are finally seeing us." William nodded, his expression thoughtful. "It's not about getting others to see you. It's about seeing yourself first. You've always had the power, Maya. You too, Zara." Maya felt a warmth spread through her chest at his words. She had always known her worth, but hearing it affirmed by the person who had been her biggest role model for so long meant more than she could express. They landed smoothly, the wheels of the plane touching down with a soft jolt. As the plane taxied to the gate, Maya looked out the window, seeing the bustling airport below. The world outside was still, but for her, everything had changed. She wasn't the same person who had boarded this flight hours ago. She had learned something about herself, about strength, about standing up for what was right. When the seatbelt sign finally turned off and the passengers began to rise, William stood first, offering his hand to both of his daughters. "Let's go," he said, his voice filled with warmth and encouragement. Maya and Zara took his hands, stepping into the aisle, ready to face whatever came next, not as daughters of a CEO, but as women who had learned the true meaning of power and respect. As they stepped off the plane and into the busy airport terminal, Maya and Zara felt a sense of weightlessness, not from the flight, but from the change in how they carried themselves. Their father, William, walked beside them, his stride confident, unwavering. The noise of the bustling crowd didn't faze them. For the first time in a long while, it felt as though they were walking through life with their heads held higher. The past few hours had been a whirlwind, but the impact of what had happened lingered in the air like the faintest whisper. Maya glanced over at Zara, who was still quiet but no longer seemed as nervous or withdrawn. It was as if the event on the plane had unlocked something in both of them, something they didn't know they had inside. They passed by the security checkpoint, and for the first time, no one glanced at them with that all-too-familiar judgmental gaze. They were just another family walking through the terminal, as if they belonged, which they did. Maya felt a small smile tug at her lips. It's weird, isn't it? She said, breaking the silence. Zara looked over at her, raising an eyebrow. What is? How different everything feels. How much power there is in just standing up for yourself. Zara paused, considering her words. Yeah, she said softly, her voice filled with newfound understanding. It's like people can see us now. William turned to look at them, his expression warm. You've always been seen. The problem wasn't with you. It was with how others chose to see you. The word stuck with Maya as they walked toward baggage claim. She had heard similar things before, but hearing them now, with this experience behind them, made them resonate in a way that was different. She had always known she was capable, but now she knew how powerful it could be to claim that power for herself. They reached the baggage carousel, and William grabbed their bags, turning to face his daughters. So, what's next for you two? He asked, a knowing smile on his face. Maya exchanged a look with Zara. I think I want to do something big, Maya said, her voice more determined than ever. Something that lets people know who I am, who we are. Zara nodded, her eyes lighting up. I'm with you, she said. William chuckled, his eyes full of pride. That's what I like to hear. Just remember, whatever you do, don't let anyone else define your worth. That's for you to decide. The conversation shifted as they walked out into the fresh air of the parking lot, but Maya's mind was still racing. She had always been aware of the barriers, the prejudice, but now it felt like a weight had been lifted. She wasn't the same person she had been when she boarded that plane hours ago. She had learned something that went beyond just winning a battle. It was about knowing that she had the right to stand tall, to be respected, and to refuse to let anyone make her feel small. The world outside had always been big, but now it felt like they had a place in it, a place they could carve out for themselves. She didn't know what the future held, but for the first time, she felt like she could take on anything. And with her father by her side and her sister walking beside her, Maya knew that nothing could stop them now. Weeks passed since that moment on the plane, but the feeling of empowerment never faded. Maya and Zara had returned to their routine, but everything was different now. Their confidence had grown, each day bringing new opportunities and challenges. They no longer felt small in a world that often overlooked them. They were taking ownership of their lives, carving out their space in places where they had once felt invisible. One afternoon, as they sat at a cafe near their home, Maya turned to Zara, her eyes bright with excitement. I've been thinking, she began, her voice full of determination, about starting something of my own. A business. Something that shows who we are. Zara raised an eyebrow, intrigued. What kind of business? She asked. Maya smiled. A platform. A space where people like us can share their stories, their voices. A place for empowerment. Zara's eyes lit up. That sounds amazing. I'm in. But where do we start? Maya leaned back in her chair, her gaze thoughtful. First, we need a name, a mission. Something that speaks to what we stand for. I want it to be more than just a business. It needs to be a movement. They spent the rest of the afternoon brainstorming ideas, their conversation flowing effortlessly. The air around them felt charged with possibility, the kind of energy that comes when you realize you have the power to shape your future. As they sipped their coffee and made plans, they both knew they weren't just talking about starting a business. They were talking about building something that would leave a lasting impact. Meanwhile, William continued to be their biggest supporter, offering advice and encouragement when they needed it most. His pride in his daughters was evident in every conversation, every smile he shared with them. He had always believed in their potential, but now, seeing them take charge of their lives, he couldn't help but feel a deep sense of fulfillment. They were doing what he had always hoped for them, standing tall, claiming their space, and paving their own path. As the weeks turned into months, the idea for their business began to take shape. They worked tirelessly, building their platform from the ground up, using their experiences to fuel their mission. And when they finally launched it, the response was overwhelming. People reached out from all over, sharing their stories, their struggles, and their triumphs. Maya and Zara had created something that resonated deeply with others, a space where people felt seen, heard, and valued. It wasn't just about the business anymore. It was about the community they had built, the lives they had touched, and the legacy they were creating. Maya looked at Zara one evening, their platform growing and flourishing in ways they had never imagined. "We did it," she said, a sense of pride and gratitude filling her heart. Zara smiled, her eyes full of warmth. "We always had it in us. We just needed to believe." Maya and Zara stood together in their office, looking out the window at the city skyline. The building they had worked so hard to get was finally theirs, and it was more than just a place. It was a symbol of everything they had fought for. The laughter of their small but growing team echoed through the space as they celebrated their first major partnership. Maya smiled, proud of how far they had come. It wasn't just the success of their platform that filled her with pride. It was the journey, the lessons learned, and the people they had met along the way. Zara turned to her, her expression reflective. "Can you believe how much has changed?" she asked, her voice soft but filled with awe. Maya shook her head, still taking it all in. "No, I can't. But then again, I can. We've always had this in us. We just needed the right push." Zara nodded, her eyes sparkling with excitement. "And we're just getting started." Maya's phone buzzed, pulling her out of her thoughts. She picked it up, her face lighting up as she saw the message from their father, William. "I'm proud of you both," it read. "Keep going. The world is yours." Maya smiled, her heart swelling with gratitude. William had always believed in them, even when they had their doubts. His support had been the foundation they built everything on, and now, seeing their vision take flight, she knew they were ready for whatever came next. Their success had never been about proving something to anyone else. It had always been about proving to themselves that they could achieve anything. And with each passing day, they were proving it over and over again. They spent the rest of the afternoon meeting with potential partners, discussing ideas and planning their next steps. Their business had become more than just a platform. It had become a movement, one that inspired others to step into their power, just as they had. By the end of the day, as they walked out of their office, the city lights sparkling ahead of them, Maya felt a sense of peace. They had made it, and this was just the beginning of something much bigger than they had ever imagined. Maya stood at the front of the conference room, looking out at the group of investors seated before her. Her heart was steady, her mind sharp. This was it, the meeting that could take their platform to the next level. Zara sat beside her, a quiet confidence in her expression, as they prepared to pitch their vision to the most influential people in the room. The air in the room felt different now. It wasn't just a business proposal. It was a declaration. They had worked tirelessly to get here, and this was their moment to show the world what they were capable of. The investors looked back at them, some skeptical, others intrigued, but all waiting for what they had to say. Maya cleared her throat and began. "Our platform is not just a tool. It's a movement, a space where voices that have been silenced, overlooked, and underestimated are given the stage they deserve. We believe in empowerment, in the power of standing tall, even when the world wants you to sit down. And we're here today to ask you to join us in making this vision a reality on a larger scale." Zara stood up beside her, adding, "We've already built a community that trusts us to amplify their stories. But this is bigger than just us. This is about every person who has been told they don't belong. We're creating a space where people can finally see themselves represented, where they can share their truth and find power in their stories." The room was silent for a moment, the weight of their words hanging in the air. Then one of the investors spoke up, his voice skeptical. "This sounds great, but how do you plan on scaling it? What's the long-term vision?" Maya's gaze didn't falter as she responded. "We plan to expand our reach, build partnerships, and ensure that our platform is accessible to anyone who needs it. The long-term vision isn't just about growth, it's about impact. We want to create a global movement, one that sparks change in the way people view themselves and each other. This is just the beginning," Zara added, "and we're already seeing the impact. Our community is growing faster than we imagined, and the response has been overwhelmingly positive. This is more than just a business. It's a movement that people are connecting with on a deeper level." The investors exchanged glances, the skepticism beginning to fade. Maya could see the shift in their faces, the realization that this wasn't just another startup, it was something meaningful. After a few moments, the lead investor spoke again. All right, let's talk numbers. We're in. The words hit Maya like a wave of relief. She glanced at Zara, who was smiling with pride. They had done it. Their vision, their hard work, their belief in themselves, it had all led to this moment. They were about to take their platform to the next level, to make a difference on a scale they had only dreamed of. As the meeting continued, Maya couldn't help but feel the weight of the journey that had brought them here. It wasn't just about the business. It was about the people they were helping, the stories they were amplifying, and the change they were starting to create. And in that moment, Maya knew that everything they had worked for was just the beginning of something even bigger. Maya and Zara stood on the rooftop of their office building, looking out at the city lights below. It had been a year since they first launched their platform, and in that time, they had built something that not only resonated with people, but also made a tangible difference in their lives. The support they had received from their community was overwhelming, and with each new partnership and success, they were one step closer to realizing their dream. But despite all the growth, Maya couldn't help but feel a sense of quiet reflection. They had come a long way, but it wasn't just the business that had transformed. It was the way they viewed themselves. They had proven that they could build something of their own, that they could create a space where voices like theirs mattered. It's hard to believe how far we've come, Zara said, her voice soft but full of emotion. Maya nodded, her eyes scanning the horizon. It really is. But it wasn't just about making a business. It was about giving people something they didn't even know they needed. A place where they could be themselves. Zara smiled, her eyes sparkling. And we've only just begun. Maya turned to look at her sister, her heart swelling with pride. You've been amazing through all of this, Zara. I couldn't have done it without you. Zara shrugged, a modest grin on her face. We've always had each other's backs. That's what makes us strong. Maya's phone buzzed in her pocket, and she pulled it out, her face lighting up as she saw the message. It was from their father. I'm so proud of you both. Keep pushing forward. You're changing the world. Maya smiled, feeling a warmth spread through her chest. William's belief in them had never wavered, and his words always gave her the strength to keep going. Dad's right, Maya said, showing the message to Zara. We're just getting started. There's so much more we can do. Zara nodded in agreement, her expression determined. We've built something special, and now it's time to take it to the next level. We're ready. The two of them stood in silence for a moment, watching the city below, the weight of everything they had accomplished settling in. They had proven that they could create change, not just for themselves, but for everyone who needed a voice. And as they looked to the future, Maya knew that nothing would hold them back. They had come this far, and the world was finally beginning to take notice. They had found their place, and they were ready to make it count. Maya and Zara stood at the front of a large conference hall, the stage set for their biggest pitch yet. The room was filled with potential partners, investors, and influencers, people whose decisions could change the trajectory of their platform. Their business had grown exponentially, but this moment felt different. It wasn't just about the numbers or the success they had achieved. It was about the impact they were making, the change they were sparking in the world. Maya adjusted the microphone and glanced at Zara, who was standing beside her with a calm expression, but Maya could see the fire in her eyes. They were ready. Thank you all for being here today, Maya began, her voice steady, the confidence in her words resonating throughout the room. Our platform has grown far beyond what we initially imagined. We set out to create a space where people's voices that have been silenced, overlooked, or dismissed, could be heard. But today we stand before you not just with a business proposal, but with a movement that's reshaping the way we see each other, the way we share our stories, and the way we define success. Zara stepped forward, adding, It's been an incredible journey, one that has been fueled by passion, resilience, and the belief that every person deserves to be seen. We've built something that isn't just about numbers or success. It's about empowering individuals, creating a community that thrives on authenticity, and fostering an environment where people feel safe to express their truth. The room was quiet as they spoke, the weight of their words settling over the audience. Maya could feel the energy shift in the room, the skepticism giving way to genuine interest. They weren't just presenting a business, they were presenting a vision. We've seen firsthand the power of connection, Maya continued. People are craving authenticity, a space where they can be themselves without fear of judgment. And that's what we've created. But we know this is only the beginning. We're here to expand, to grow, and to reach even more people who need this platform. And with your support, we can make that vision a reality. Zara looked out at the crowd, her voice carrying a sense of purpose. This isn't just about us. This is about all the people who've been told they don't belong. It's about the single mother working 2 jobs, the student fighting to be heard, the entrepreneur trying to find her voice. Our platform isn't just a business, it's a lifeline. And we're asking you to help us make that lifeline stronger. Maya felt a surge of pride as she looked at Zara. They had come so far, from the days of uncertainty to standing on this stage, ready to take the next step. The crowd remained silent for a few moments, the weight of their words sinking in. Then, one of the investors stood up, his face thoughtful. "You've built something truly remarkable," he said. "We believe in your vision. We're in." Maya and Zara exchanged a glance, their hearts racing with excitement. It was happening. This was the moment they had worked for. As the applause began to fill the room, Maya couldn't help but feel a sense of fulfillment. They had proven to themselves and to the world that they belonged. They had built something powerful, something that was changing lives. And this was only the beginning. They had always believed in their vision, but now others believed in it too. The journey wasn't over, it was just beginning.